No, I should only marry for love. All of the love in the world. It's not fraud. Marriage was still had, and they died as long as you don't get caught. It's not fraud. I'm not even. What do you mean caught? I'm not the one killing them. I'm not killing them. I'm not the one doing that part. Yeah. It's kind of like, those books where like the person is like at rock bottom, and they're like, man, if only something would go my way. And then like it just so happens that like a super rich hunk goes by them and like jostles them, and they're like, and he's like, oh my god, miss, are you okay? And like they look into each other's eyes and they fall in love. But then like they hear all these things of like, oh, Richard, he's a cold businessman. He doesn't ever love anyone. All of his wives end up leaving him. And you're like, oh no, what kind of an asshole is this guy? But like he goes like, hey, you want to live in my house and eat my food? And you're like, I can't really say no, because I really want to go to his house and eat his food. And so you go to his house and you eat his food. And then like a couple days go by and you notice that sometimes Richard walks around like after taking a shower, and you're like, oh man, Richard, his abs are glistening and his pectorals are rather fit. And he's like, what are you looking at? And you're like, oh, nothing, I'm just, and he's like, the bath is still ready. And then you got to go to the bath, and then when you come out, he's all dressed but laying in the windowsill with like glasses on, reading a book. And you're like, I've never seen Richard with glasses on. And then like later that day he goes to bed, but then you're like, I want to do something for Richard. So the next morning you decide to like make Richard eggs, but then you mess up the eggs and you're like, oh no, I messed up the eggs, I need to start a new batch. So you put the eggs you messed up to the side. But then Richard wakes up and sees the eggs and he's like, thank you. And he grabs them. You're like, no, Richard, those aren't the correct eggs. I'm making you the correct eggs. And he's like, these are really good. And you go, doki doki. And like he eats them. And like, you're like, there's no fucking way he thought those were good. And then he goes to work and you're feeling all these feelings because Richard just told you that your crummy ass eggs are good. So like later on, you're like, there's no way that what's going on? So you call up one of his exes and she's all like, nah, I got rid of Richard because he was so cold and he didn't want this from me. All he wanted was for me to be lazy and lay around, and I'm a go-getter. So I dropped his ass. And it's like, what? All I want to do is be lazy and laze around. So Richard comes home and you're like, Richard, I just, is there anything I can do for you? I made you dinner. And Richard's like, oh, thanks. And then he gets it. And you're like, man, Richard, he's so cool. And then he's like, after dinner, he's like, you want to hang out and play like Mario Kart? And you're like, yes, Richard, I want to hang out and play Mario Kart. And then you guys play Mario Kart together. And you realize Richard's a fucking cheater and he beat the shit out of you. And you're like, how dare you? And you call him racist for hitting you with a blue shell because you learned that from Alejandro Saab. And then so he goes to bed and you watch him as he goes to bed and you go to your bed. And then you wake up in the morning and you make him eggs again. Only these are good eggs. And he like has that look in his eye where like there's like little sparkles like, ugh. And like, they're so much better. These eggs are so much better than yesterday. And like, you're like, I made these eggs, Richard, and I hope you're good. And I'm going to beat your ass later today. And he's like, oh yeah. And you're like, yeah, I'm going to beat your ass, Richard. And he's like, I'm going to beat your ass. And you're like, oh yeah, we'll see about that. Then Richard goes to work and you train all day. You're like, I'm going to beat Richard's ass at Mario Kart later. And then like he comes home, but like he comes home a little late, right? Because his boss made him stay back a bit longer and he's a little bit drunk. And you're like, Richard, why are you so drunk? And he's like, I'm gonna beat your ass. And you're like, what? And then he gets a little close and you're like, ah. And then Richard like whispers down at you and he's like, I'm sorry. And you're like, what? And then he steps away. And then it's like, what's wrong, Richard? I thought you were going to give me a big old smooch. And he's like, no, I can't do that to you. And it's like, what do you mean, Richard? And he's like, I'm dying. And I'm like, what? And he's like, he tells you at the end of the year, the doctors say that Richard's going to die. And you're like, why, Richard? And he's like, fucking plot disease. And you're like, oh, is that contagious? And he's like, no, it's not contagious. But all of my people, all the people in my life have left me because I'm so cold and indifferent to a lot of things. But actually, I'm actually just really sensitive on the inside, and I have chiseled abs, and I'm really cool and a big dick. And you're like, whoa, Richard, you're telling me a lot of weird things right now. And he's like, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm really drunk, but later this year, I'm gonna die and stuff. And it's like, well, why did you pick me up off the street, Richard? And he's like, because I wanted to give someone something before I left, and I'm gonna marry you. And you're like, why? And so you start like getting more and more the feelings, right? And eventually you get better at Mario Kart, but it takes a long time because that game, fucking, you learn a little bit too late that you get a speed boost from picking up coins. And Richard knew that whole fucking time, the cheater, but he never told you. But he wanted you to learn on your own because he wanted to make sure that after he was gone, you had the problem solving skills you would need to make it in the world of the rich. So whenever you are going through this and after a couple months you get married, and then Richard is like, hey, we're married. And I'm like, I know, Richard. And then we're together in that one night. And he's like, okay, well, I'm going to go take a shower and then we can play Mario Kart. And I'm like, but Richard. And he's like, what? And it's like, what if I want to take a shower with you? And then you do. And then you all have sex. And then Richard slowly starts to be a little bit more open with you because you guys are a lot more open with each other. And so then you and Richard play Mario Kart a whole bunch. And he's like, maybe I shouldn't have banned you from being on the internet. You should go back to your streaming, guys. And it's like, no, Richard, I can hold out this last little bit of time. I know why you wanted me to hold off from being on the internet, because you want all of my time. It's like, no, I don't want that. I don't want to monopolize you. And you're like, Richard, I can do that for you. I can give that up for you for a little while, and it'll be okay. And Richard's he's happy about that. He's really happy that you said you would do that. So then lots of things happen. There's some ups and downs. One of his exes come by and says, actually, our marriage was never finalized. So the divorce meant that we weren't actually divorced, but because we got a divorce, that meant that we were married before. And through this property of transitive craziness, I'm still married to you. So you can't be married to them. And then everybody gasps. But we get through that plot pretty quick because they're actually stupid and that's not how law works. So we get through that plot pretty damn quick, and then I kick her out with my big toe. I just bam. But then she's like, no, guys, actually all I wanted to do was actually come and play Mario Kart with you guys, because I saw how fun you guys were having it. And it's like, oh, that's okay. You can come play Mario Kart with us, you crazy bitch. And so she comes back and we play Mario Kart. And then it gets to the near time of the end, and Richard's like, I know that I'm almost there. And it's like, no, Richard. And it's like, yes, I am. So then we gotta kiss. And I'm like, okay, Richard, we'll kiss. And it's like, what about your ex that's been playing Mario Kart with us and kissing us on the side a little bit? And it's like, well, she can fuck herself. She's not gonna get my love kisses. She only gets my lust kisses. And I'm like, that's fair, Richard. She only gets my lust kisses too. And then we have a couple of rounds of the regular day, making eggs, Mario Karting, beating the shit out of his ex, both in Mario Kart and in other ways. And then, well, not in those ways, but other ways, more sexy ways. And then we get to the end, And Richard is like, well, here I go. And it happens. He does pass away, leaving me with his big house, his money, his riches, and his ex-wife. And then I come back to Twitch and I'm like, hey guys, what's going on? I'm rich now and my husband's dead. And I have a story to tell. Remember that one stream where I said that really weird, like, entire life story thing? Yeah, that was real. I predicted the fuck out of that. Anyway, I'm back now. Let's get back to fucking 5-Darbs. And scene. Yeah. Zero, you do not know how happy I am. You show up now instead of like a couple of seconds before. You do not know how happy I am that you didn't hear what I just said. Hey, a new guy. Mark Crembas. Mark Crembas. Mark Crembas. That was all off the dome, guys. That was all off the dome. Ronan, hello. Hello, Zero. Merry Crembas. Merry Crembas, Kome. Thank you, Kome, for the 21 months. Very nice. Thank you. Yeah, we just had a big conversation about my pretend boyfriend Richard and his ex-wife, who I didn't give a name to. Guys, what's the ex-wife's name? What's like a rich lady name, but like they're also kind of hot? What's like, because I would say Karen, but that has like some connotations. Gretchen's pretty good. Kendall, I like Kendall. Rebecca, Diane, Richel. Instead of Richard, we have Richard and Richel. That's pretty good. Samantha, I can't do Samantha. I have a cousin Sam, so I can't do that. We'll go Kendall. I like Kendall. Yeah. So in summary, people who just came from Zero's side, I just explained a life where I get picked up by a rich hunk named Richard. We go through a year of happy marriage, in which there are many soap opera events that happen. And then his ex-wife comes into play, but she only wanted to play Mario Kart. So we let her play Mario Kart after the bad stuff happened, and we kiss sometimes. And then he died. I get all of his riches and his ex-wife, and I come back to streaming. Yeah. That will be one of the only ways I stop streaming for a while.